It was the dead of winter when Ethan saw her. A young girl, no more than 17, shivering outside the grocery store with her arms wrapped around her belly. Snow clung to her hair, her cheeks flushed raw from the biting wind. People passed her by, some glancing, most ignoring, a few shaking their heads. But Ethan couldn't ignore her. He knew what it meant to be abandoned, and he recognized the look in her eyes, a mixture of fear, shame, and desperation. "Are you all right?" Ethan asked softly, pulling his coat tighter against the cold. The girl hesitated. I'm fine," she stammered, though her trembling made it clear she wasn't. Then Ethan noticed her belly. She was pregnant. Very pregnant. That was the moment everything changed. Ethan was a single dad, barely holding things together. His wife had passed away 3 years earlier from cancer, leaving him with their 8-year-old son, Liam. Since then, life had been an uphill climb. He worked long hours at a mechanic shop, rushing home to help Liam with homework, cooking cheap meals, and collapsing into bed too exhausted to think. He lived paycheck to paycheck. Most days, he wondered if he was failing as a father. And yet, standing there in the cold, looking at that frightened teenager, Ethan knew he couldn't walk away. "Do you have somewhere to go?" he asked. The girl shook her head. Tears filled her eyes, freezing on her lashes. "My mom kicked me out. My boyfriend doesn't want anything to do with the baby. I don't have anyone." Ethan's heart clenched. He saw his wife's face in his mind, her warm eyes, her endless compassion. She would have wanted him to help. And Liam, well, Liam had always wanted a sister. "Come on," Ethan said, holding out his hand. "You shouldn't be out here. You and the baby need to be warm." She stared at him for a long moment, wary but desperate. Then, slowly, she placed her small, frozen hand in his. Her name was Grace. The weeks that followed weren't easy. Grace moved into Ethan's tiny 2-bedroom house. She slept in Liam's old bed while Liam happily took the couch, claiming it was like camping. Still, there were challenges. Ethan struggled with the extra cost of groceries, doctor's appointments, and maternity supplies. Grace struggled with guilt, feeling like a burden. Sometimes they argued about chores, about her slipping into silence when asked about her family, about Ethan's overprotective worry. But slowly, they began to form a bond. Liam adored Grace. He would sit beside her and chatter endlessly about superheroes and science projects, occasionally pressing his small ear against her belly, waiting for the baby to kick. When it did, his laughter filled the house, and Grace would smile, really smile, not the forced kind she used when she first arrived. One night, Ethan found Grace crying in the kitchen. "Why are you being so nice to me?" she asked. "You don't even know me. I've ruined my life. I don't deserve this." Ethan knelt beside her. "Grace, everyone deserves a chance. And that baby? That baby deserves to come into a world where someone cares. If I can be that person, then I will be." It was in that moment that Grace began to see Ethan not as just a man who offered her shelter, but as family. The night Grace went into labor, a snowstorm raged outside. Ethan drove her to the hospital through blinding flakes, gripping the steering wheel as his knuckles turned white. He whispered prayers he hadn't spoken since his wife died. Hours later, Grace gave birth to a healthy baby girl. She named her Hope. When Ethan held the tiny infant for the first time, tears streamed down his face. It was as if a piece of his wife's kindness had returned to him, wrapped in a blanket with tiny fists and soft cries. Liam beamed with pride, declaring himself the best big brother ever. Life didn't magically become easier after Hope was born. Ethan had to take on more shifts, Grace had to balance sleepless nights with finishing school, and there were moments when they all felt stretched thin. But there was also laughter. There were family dinners filled with warmth. There were bedtime stories read aloud while Grace rocked Hope to sleep and Ethan dozed in a chair. They weren't blood, but they were family. Years passed. Grace grew into a confident young woman. She graduated high school, then college, with Ethan and Liam cheering the loudest at every ceremony. She never forgot the night Ethan took her in, nor the sacrifices he made so she and Hope could thrive. Ethan, now grayer and slower, often thought about how different his life would have been if he'd walked past that shivering girl in the snow. Without Grace, his home would have been quieter, lonelier. Without hope, he might never have rediscovered the joy of rocking a baby to sleep, of watching a child take her first steps. And then came the day Ethan's world was turned upside down once again. He collapsed at work, his chest tightening, his breath failing. The diagnosis was heart disease. The doctors said he needed surgery, expensive surgery. Ethan feared the worst. He didn't want to leave Liam alone, didn't want Grace and Hope to lose the man who had become their rock. He broke down one night, confessing his fears. "I don't know how much longer I can fight. I don't want to burden you all." Grace took his hand. "Ethan, you're not a burden. You're my dad. Maybe not by blood, but in every way that matters. You saved me when no one else would. Now it's my turn." And she meant it. Grace had gone into nursing, driven by the compassion Ethan had shown her. She poured every ounce of her training, her connections, and her determination into making sure Ethan got the care he needed. She fundraised, she worked double shifts, and she stood by his side through every painful step of recovery. Months later, Ethan walked out of the hospital alive. Weak, but alive, because of the daughter he had chosen all those years ago. The story didn't end there. Hope, now a bright and joyful child, grew up calling Ethan Grandpa. Liam, inspired by the family's resilience, pursued a career in teaching, wanting to shape young lives. Grace, stronger than she ever thought possible, built a stable home for her daughter and for Ethan, ensuring he would never feel alone again. And one quiet evening, as they all sat around the dinner table, laughter echoing through the house, Ethan realized something profound. He thought he had saved Grace that snowy night. But the truth was, Grace, and the little baby she carried, had saved him.